Welcome, everybody, to tonight's event. My name is Sam. I'm the events coordinator at A Room of One's Own bookstore. It's great to see so many people turning out for this event. We've got two fantastic authors to talk about both of their newest works tonight. The first was Chris Stark, a native Anishinaabe and Cherokee award-winning writer, researcher, visual artist, and national and international speaker. Her first novel, Nichols, A Tale of Dissociation, was a Lambda Literary finalist. Her essays, poems, academic writing, and creative nonfiction have appeared in numerous publications and books. Her writing has been nominated twice for a Pushcart Prize. In 2012, she was named a Changemaker by the Women's Press and was a Loft Series Mentor finalist. In 2019, she received the International Social Justice Citizen Award from the International Leadership Institute. She is also a member of the Minnesota Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force. Our second author, R.B. Simon, a queer artist and writer of African and European American descent. She endeavors to create poetry centered in the mosaic of identity, the experiences that make us who we are in totality. Having battled mental health issues, substance abuse disorder, and trauma throughout her life, she is now in recovery and studying to become an art therapist, supporting others on the same journey. She has been published in multiple print and online journals, including the Greenlight Literary Journal, Blue Literary Journal, Electric Moon, and Literary Mama. I will place links to both of their new books, which are The Good Truth and Carnival Lights, reversed respectively. Those will be put links in the chat for our audience tonight. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of tonight's event. If throughout the event you hear anything, you want to hear more about it, please do not hesitate to deposit a question either in the chat bar on the right-hand side, or also there is a handy tab at the bottom of your screen that's just labeled Ask a Question. You can submit questions there, and I will come back on screen after RB and Chris's conversation to moderate and ask whatever questions you'd like answered. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over to our two authors. Thanks again to both RB and Chris, and to the rest of you in the audience for being here tonight. On behalf of Room of One's Own, welcome, and I hope you have a good time. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Renee, for bringing me in and allowing me to participate in this. I have a special place in my heart for A Room of One's Own, having lived in Madison for many years and having frequented the store quite a few times in those years. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I am super excited to be here with my good friend Chris, and we met through A Room of One's Own as roommates many, many years ago, and now we are both here celebrating the publication of our new book. So it's super exciting for me to be here with my good friend, and I'm looking forward to a great evening.
Yeah, all right.
So Chris, you're up.
Yeah, all right, great. So I'm going to read excerpt from my book, Carnival Lights, novel. It's technically historical fiction. Most of it is fiction, but it does have some true figures from history in Minnesota, and some true events make appearances in the book. So I will be jumping around in the book, of course. The book does not jump around this frequently, just so you know, but I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a taste of some of the different aspects of the book. So the main storyline is set in 1969, just over the course of a few weeks in August, as two Ojibwe cousins, Cher and Chris, teenagers, leave their fictitious Goodhue Reservation in northern Minnesota for Minneapolis. The prologue begins at village of Park Point, August 3rd, 1860. The carnival came to town, but not until after the Indian bones were excavated. Under the red beam of the Minnesota Point Lighthouse, cast by a fourth-order Fresnel lens and illuminated by a kerosene lamp, a motley assortment of Finnish, German, and French men wielding spades and pickaxes broke joints, cracked femurs, shattered fingers, and split the skulls of those buried long before Europeans set foot on the shores of the westernmost tip of Gitchigami, renamed Lake Superior by the French. A former John Jacob Astor agent, in concert with the acting mayor of the unincorporated town of Duluth, made the decision to build a carnival to brighten the dour mood of the 60-odd dwelling on the shoreline and the few hundred in the logging and mining camps nearby. Although it was a hefty investment with questionable immediate return, the two men had plans for the port and needed to attract hundreds and eventually thousands more European immigrants to build the city. The two men believed once others heard of the grand carnival held there, Europeans would come in droves. The Europeans were sitting on a gold mine of trade prospects now that they had moved the Indians off of the shoreline closer to Fond du Lac. The Indian graveyard had been a problem, though. The men worried someone might kick up a bone during the carnival and cause a sensation, frightening business to St. Paul or Chicago. So the bones were hacked out of the soil by criminal castaways and thrown into a wagon drawn by a single draft horse, lent by a man who used the horse to clear tree stumps from the burgeoning township. That is how the Indian bones traveled to their new home, nearly 3 miles down the river that out of Gitchigami, the largest lake in the world. Goodhue Reservation, Minnesota, 1955. Chris and Cher's auntie, Em, stayed awake at night when she was young to listen to the adult stories, even as her siblings faded into their dreams at their grandparents' wigwam. Em's only movement was the flutter of her eyelashes, stark as spider legs against the shining whites of her eyes. Em knew how to be still. Her mother and grandmother had pinched her lips as a baby to teach her quiet, like their mothers and grandmothers had pinched their babies' lips to keep them silent in the forests and marshes, so their cries would not alert enemies lurking nearby. Em knew how to breathe so shallow that one would have to look for a long, hard time before realizing her belly and chest moved with life. She'd practiced as a girl, hiding from the white lady social workers. Her fluttering eyelashes were the only thing that could make her grandmother say, "The little one watches," from the other side of the wigwam. The Army issued wool blankets separated the wigwam in two when needed, pinned back to let the heat from the fire creep into the second room where the children slept. Then the stories were told softer, all in Indian, no mixing of English and Indian words, which the girl could figure out, her mind bending in two languages. Or the stories simply ended altogether, the talk moving on to jokes and teasing and gossiping, such that Em lost the thread of that which she was not to hear. Indian dying from TB and influenza and the pox disease. Entire families gone, no one able to bury them, the animals and insects consuming their bodies. Or one left, a child, found alone without food or water for days, snatched up by the English and given or sold to foster homes, farmers, boarding schools, men on ships, or the state, where they'd be fed just enough to be kept alive. Many were sexually violated, girls and boys. When Em did manage to hear the stories, the ones not intended for her young spirit, the ones her grandparents wanted to protect her from, the most alarming of all were how Indians were captured and sold the way white men sell cattle and pigs, and how Indians were taken across the water, Gitchigami, never to return. Indian bloodlines were spread across all the world now, sold into slavery like the people with the wool on their heads. The children, her mothers cried when the stories were told. The children. Em knew her mother had been one of those children, and Em, even at that tender age, like most Indian children, knew Indian children were still in danger from the welfare ladies who came in their clippity-clop shoes with their clipboards, checking off boxes on their papers, looking for Indian children, searching for any little thing to take them away, and sometimes for nothing, sometimes just making it all up, stealing the children when their mothers was at the neighbors trading wild rice for eggs, or at the tavern on a 3-day bender, the kids left with relatives. Didn't matter if mother sent her children to their grandmothers. The social work lady stole the kids anyway and sold them to a white couple in Sacramento or Dubuque or Philadelphia, where no one would tell them who they really were, where they'd grow up feeling never quite right, never at home in their skin, no matter what color. Where one day, when they were 9 years old, they would see their shadow on a sidewalk during a game of hopscotch and know they were Indian. So we're going to jump forward a little bit in the book now. And the two girls, the cousins, Cher and Chris, have just arrived at the Minneapolis bus depot. So it's now August 1969. Girls, very, very pretty girls. Cher opened her eyes but did not move her body. A white man leaned against the wall next to Cher but looked at Kristen. Kristen moved so the water fountain was between her and Cher and the man, the look of a caught animal in her face and in the way her body stood under her clothes. The man stepped around Cher. He leaned over the water fountain and made a show of spreading his legs, sliding his brown, shiny, flat-bottomed shoes out to the side, settling in slow to take a drink. Kristen darted to the other side of Cher. The man took a long drink. Now that was some fine tasting water. Cher pulled the pack to her but continued to squat. She knew to get up right then would be a sign of fear. And she knew, after years of working with cows and horses and pigs on the farm and hunting deer and watching her father deal with white people he did not trust, which was most, that one must never show fear. She must be steady. "What's your name there?" the man asked, using his chin like a finger to point at Chris. His shoes splayed outward under dirty jeans that folded over in ridges around his knees and ankles. Chris blurted out. "Chris," the man said, like he was playing around with the word in his mouth. "That's a pretty name. Can I call you Chrissy?" Kristen froze. Her father called her Chrissy when he was drunk. "Sir." Cher dangled her arms over her knees, using a particular language reserved for interacting with white people. "Excuse us, but we've had a long trip." "That's so," he said, leaning against the wall. Cher stood and strapped on the pack. "Come on, Chris. Time to go." "This jackass bothering you?" Another white man appeared out of nowhere. Cher jerked around, the pack to the wall. The water fountain was now between both men and the girls. The shiny shoe man stepped to the other side of Kristen. "Get the hell out of here," the new man said. He was older, dressed in navy pants and a clean, white, button-down shirt. "Go to hell yourself," the first man said. They shoved one another until the new man put his forearm over the other man's neck, pinning him against the wall. "All right," the shiny shoe man rasped. The new man hit him on the chest. "Get out." He walked out the door the girls came in through. Cher nodded at the new man. "Time to go," she said. "Wait," he said. "Are you meeting someone here?" "No, yes," Cher and Kristen said, their words coming out on top of the other. "Aha," the new man said. "I think you've got a problem." He nodded towards the glass door at the far end of the room. Two cops stood out on the street corner. Kristen froze. When her father was drunk, he used to threaten to call the sheriff on her grandparents. The new man watched her. "Does someone hit you, honey?" he asked. "No, no problems, sir." Cher grabbed Kristen's arm. "Come on, Grandma will be here any minute." Yeah, Kristen couldn't think. Cher pushed her towards the glass door, figuring it the best choice since the other man had gone out the other door. The new man followed. "Girls," he hissed. "One word for me and you two will be in the pen tonight and headed for juvie jail in the morning." "No, please," Kristen said, turning around. "We haven't done anything." "One word," and he nodded towards the cops outside at the corner. "And those two pigs will be over here waiting with you for your long-lost grandma." "We've got to catch our ride." Cher pulled Kristen's elbow. "Juvenile runaways," the new man said. "You've done plenty on that count alone." He moved quicker than he looked capable of and put his hand on Kristen's other elbow, sidling up to her so it would not be obvious he was holding her. "Where are you going, Chrissy?" he whispered in her ear. "Have you figured that out yet?" He squeezed her elbow. "Why don't you come with me? I'll take good care of you." "Get your hands off her." Cher hacked his arm and kicked his kneecap with the sole of her boot. The man yelped, grabbing his knee. The clerk yelled, "Hey, run, Chris." Chris bolted out the glass door, the parking lot to her right now, filled with the Greyhound buses resting in the dark. In front of her was a busy street. The cops were across it. She took 2 steps to the right and then turned to the left. Cher pushed out the door and the two girls ran into each other, their feet tangling. They fell, banging their knees and elbows on the cement. Cher jumped up, pulled Chris to her feet, and the girls ran to the left alongside the bus depot, hoping the cops hadn't noticed. A middle-aged white couple stepped out a door into their path, forcing them to stop and then start again. Cher looked back. The couple stood apart, watching the girls run. Between them, Cher saw the well-dressed man on the sidewalk, looking to his right, away from the girls. The girls ran. The pack slapped against Cher's back. So now we're going to jump forward even more in the book. And the girls met a boy, Jacob, on the streets, and the three of them are going to an anti-war rally in Minneapolis. High, shrill whistles careened over the rally. "Run!" people yelled. Darren and his woman flew by. The woman turned sideways, yelled "Run" at the girls. Her clog skittered across the dirt. She ran back to it, slipped it on, and then disappeared into the fray. Men and women ran, shouting, "Run! Police brutality! The pigs are loose!" The police's dog whistle shrieked. From the east, police officers waded into the crowd, cracking the heads and shoulders of the protesters with bats. The teens ran. "This way," Cher shouted. She ran half a block and slid headfirst under lilac bushes growing next to an apartment building. Screams, whistles, and rocks flew overhead. The sound of the rocks ticking off brick buildings popped Cher's memory of her grandmother, telling her that the spirits always took four, while her knife snapped carrots into medallion-shaped pieces for soup. Like the time the Rosso infant died in a truck accident on Highway 79, his blanket-wrapped body sailed between two tall cedar trees the farmer had left to break the wind. People said it looked like a football the high school boys kicked through the uprights on crisp fall evenings in town. The baby landed with a thud in the soft, furrowed ground. His neck snapped. 2 days later, 3 teenage boys drowned as they swam just 10 feet offshore at Little Elbow River. All strong swimmers. No one could explain it. The families of those who died were Methodist and Episcopalian Indians. The funeral homes in Cher's grandparents' house were packed full of Indians from all over Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and Canada for weeks. As Cher pushed through the lilac bush, she thought, "Grandpa, Grandma, Dad, there will be a fourth." Cher smacked into a chain-link fence tangled with the bushes, saw a section where the fence flipped up like Batgirl's hair, and slid under it. The other two followed, scrambling under the fence. The teens crouched in a yard on the other side of the fence, catching their breath as people screamed, whistles screeched, and rocks and bricks flew in every direction. "All hell's breaking loose," a man behind them yelled. "The cops are macing everyone." The girl's eyes locked. Chris did not see in Cher what she usually saw, that it would be all right. Fear moved in. Something bent between the girls, snapped, bore down by too much weight. Their losses, the chaos exploding around them, their pain, their ancestors' pain. Something moved in. Chris felt it and shivered in the heat. Cher did not see the crow-like bat beast flapping about Chris or feel the air thrust out from beneath its wings, but Cher smelled it. Without thinking, she spit. Her grandfather had told her, "If death gets near you, spit it out. Don't let it settle in you." And Cher did on her runs around the farm, through the woods, and in town. If she happened by dead animals, a squirrel smashed flat on the road, a ripped-apart carcass in the woods, she spit. If she got a whiff of a rotting, rancid smell, she spit. And so, crouched in the yard, she spit, without a thought. Cops on horses lined the alley east of the girls and boy, cordoning off the yard where they hid. Cops cracked batons on head. One yelled through a bullhorn, "Attention, move north, move north." The horses moved as one unit northward towards the cross streets as their riders leaned and stretched to smash the heads and shoulders of protesters with their batons. Protesters screamed and ran. Residents hid in their basements. "Pigs," Chris screamed when she saw a cop whack a man. She wanted to throw herself into the chaos. She wanted to burn up in it. 1 block away, hiding behind a garbage can used as a shield, a young Indian woman lobbed concrete chunks she'd gathered from a construction site at the police, her large brown eyes visible under the rag tied over her nose and mouth. If she had known about the girls 1 block west of her, or if the girls had known of her, the looming disaster may have been prevented. Instead, each fought as she could, not knowing 45 strides separated them from being reunited after she'd left her nieces standing by the barn. However, since the spirits have their ways and fate has yet to be cheated, the girls and the young woman missed one another in the amount of time it would have taken Cher to sprint 38 sections of Portland cement sidewalk, laid 50 years earlier by Lithuanian scabs, who merely stared at the throngs of German and Swedish day laborers, hurling insults at them in English, German, and Swedish, but not Lithuanian, Russian, or Polish, the languages they spoke. The Lithuanians mixed, measured, spread, and evened the concrete block after block, unsure why the Americans, who spoke multiple languages, screamed and marched around them as they worked, unsure why they stomped, spit, and tossed rocks at their heads and into the wet cement. And then, every Friday, the Lithuanians collected their pay, drank it gone at the neighborhood Russian tavern, where they could communicate well enough, returned to the flats they shared, and mounted their wives, sometimes hearing the unintelligible chants of the angry German and Swedish men as they thrust into their wives in 3- and 4-room apartments, filled with sleeping and not sleeping family members and odd fellows from the old country. So now we're gonna jump forward a little bit more. And the girls, Cher and Chris, have now made their way to the Minnesota State Fair, again, August 1969. The girls moved through the city within a city. People shouted, music blared, rides clanged, grease sizzled, and vendors shouted their wares. The world's largest collection of live butterflies takes some homes for a penny, folks. One shiny copper penny starts your own collection of butterflies. And hot bratwurst with sauerkraut straight off the ship from Germany. And take a ride on the giant slide, folks, safe for the kids and fun for the adults. Biggest slide in all the world, right here at the Minnesota State Fair, best state fair in all the world. Yes, sirree, folks, step right up, take a ride on the giant slide. The girls passed between a 3-story high wooden statue of a pilgrim woman outside Minnesota Territorial Pioneers Hall and the shuttered booth of Wendell R. Anderson, your next governor. America the Beautiful blared through a speaker from Wendell's booth. The tinny sound of the song and its relentless repetition pushed the girls across the street to a lit-up sign the size of a living room wall that read, "Welcome to the Minnesota State Fair, the largest fair in the world. 322 acres of fun and fascination, nearly 1 million visitors each year." A black and white photograph of past and current board members was featured beneath the words. 12 smiling white men in short-sleeved dress shirts and ties surrounded an elderly white woman holding a blue ribbon and a pie. The photograph had been snapped in 1952, the year the board shipped in a V-2 Nazi rocket, displaying it at that year's fair on a plot of open land behind the oldest French fry stand at the fair, opened in 1932. Some on the board wondered about the wisdom of displaying a rocket that had killed thousands of Brits. Plus, news was leaking out about the 20,000 skeletal Jews who died building them in the subterranean tunnels of Mittelwerk in Nazi Germany. But they voted it in anyway. "The man," Chris said, looking at the photo on the sign. "Yeah," Cher said, "a bunch of them, and I want some of that pie." The girls laughed from their bellies, now concave. Included in the photograph was one D.T. Grusendorf, past president of the Minnesota State Fair Board, Duluth City Council member, and Duluth area Forestry County agent. Grusendorf's personal crown jewel was his 1959 execution of a grand vision he had of a 26-foot-high, gold-colored fiberglass and weatherproof plastic component Neptune statue to celebrate Duluth's recent designation as a foreign trade zone, which would bring in thousands of ocean-going ships. The Roman god of the sea held a trident in one hand and a replica of the Ramon de la Ringa in the other. The Ramon was the first modern ocean ship to pass through the canal in Duluth after the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway, which allowed ocean-going vessels to sail all the way to Duluth, creating an even bigger shipping market for the inland seaport, state, and region, including the increased export of Ojibwe women and children, although, of course, selling Ojibwe people on the ships would never be publicly discussed in any tourist pamphlets or AAA guidebooks. Grusendorf was behind the push to relocate Neptune to Canal Park in Duluth. Mayor E. Clifford Mork explained it would be a tremendous tourist attraction for the city. Arriving in October of 1959, the statue stood for 4 years a few yards west from the 1870 carnival. Pockmarked by stones thrown by residents, One day, the torch used by city employees to remove the statue from its base for cleaning ignited the king of the sea. The magnificent vision of the mayor and a city council member of Neptune welcoming foreign ships to the shores of Duluth went up in flames, leaving just a pile of ash. The enormous statue burned in 5 minutes due to its insides being filled with paper mache. The girls sat on a curb with a bucket of fries and a Coke. Faces merged into each other in the dark, lit up by the lights from the caramel apple carts, root beer stands, pretzel booths, foot-long hot dog booths, and the grandstand that read, State Fair Grandstand, live shows daily. Hey, Chris nudged Cher, pointing her lips towards a group of Indians in bell-bottom jeans. Sue, I bet. Cher nodded, absorbed by the food, her stomach releasing a nod of hunger. What are we going to do? Kristen asked, her mouth full of French fries. Find a place to sleep. Cher shifted her boots on the pavement. Cher and Kristen licked the grease and salt off their fingers, drained the Coke, and tossed the cup in a barrel. The girls set off west down Minnesota Avenue, looking for a place to sleep. So I'll end there, and just again want to thank everyone for coming to see and to listen to Renee and I, and I'll let Renee now take the floor, so to speak.
Thank you so much for that, Chris. I was so mesmerized. I was like, oh, it's my turn. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us tonight. And I am so excited to be able to read for you some of my pieces from my new chapbook, which is titled The Good Truth. It will be releasing soon. It was due out today, but I hear that there are some delays, unfortunately, at the publishing company. So it is available for pre-order and will ship to you, or you can order it at a Room of One's Own. So hang tight, and it's coming. So I grew up in Wisconsin, and like a lot of people from Wisconsin had northern Wisconsin relatives, even though I grew up in the State Line area. So this first poem is about growing up in Wisconsin with northern Wisconsin relatives that I visited. The first poem is entitled Rosendale, Wisconsin, 1981. The galloping downbeat from the mistress of the dark pinball machine's background music pounds through the soles of my sand and pebble-filled sneakers. Orange knee-high soda clutched in my grubby 10-year-old hand like the goldfish prize at a county fair. Its fluorescent sweet imbibed in desperate swigs from a bottle held with just one pointer finger around the neck, like the grown-ups sitting a few feet away at the laminate-topped bar counter. Amidst the country twang, they line the long, narrow bar like birds on a wire, feet propped on the bottom rungs of the red vinyl and chrome bar stools, farm boots covered in mud and cow shit, their deeply tanned muscles framed by sleeveless sweatshirts, all in the same over-bleached gray knit. Labor-roughened hands lift sweating brown beers to sun-chapped lips, crook-fingered, while they talk in grown-up mutters too low to warrant my pre-adolescent attention. But always I stand, cocked, one-eyed, toward them, positioned just so between the bar and my younger cousins playing pinball next to me. Always, I note who is swaying, who is slurring first. Mistress Elvira peers down at us, lights flashing all around her bouffant of jet black hair, smiles obliging, amused, as if she is just about to start laughing. As one by one, the farmers lean away from the sticky faux top, the empty bottles, jingling keys in hand, beckoning the youngsters into buckleless back seats of rusting pickups, sticky fingers pressed against glass in silent farewell. All right. So on to my second piece. This piece was actually inspired by a visit to Chris. And I don't know if she even knows that. We went up to visit Chris in White Earth and went to a powwow there. And my daughter got to dance in her very first powwow. And I have a picture of her dressed in a dance shawl. And I wrote a poem about that picture, and it's called Second Harvest. She is such a tiny bud, raw with winter's scrubbed potential, born to high winds and parents of dune thistle, grandparents of red baneberry, lost in a rough country of ancestry, not recognizing oak from aspen, from elder. I want to bring her baskets of our fruit, bowls of blackberries or little wild strawberries just plump enough to crush between teeth, to burst open and stain the lips. I want them tart with her lineage, sweet with the pith of who she will become, of how she was rooted 1,000 years ago. And I am no master gardener. Unskilled at pruning or coaxing bud to blossom, I can't tell sly weed from straining sapling except for this one glorious shoot. So, go ahead and dance, little one. Let your bare toes take root everywhere they will. Let the winds shake loose your laughter like seeds, and let it settle, fatten, sprout, and seek new sun. This is no longer my harvest. All right. Thank you. The next poem I'm going to read takes a little more serious turn. As mentioned in my bio, I have struggled with substance abuse disorder, and have lost some pretty important people close to me to addiction. And I think it's a pretty important thing to talk about through my work. And so this poem is dedicated to anybody who struggles with substance use disorder or who is in recovery from substance use disorder. It's called Wind. Gusting in as furiously as her mother's anger, the blackberry clouds sending branches flinging like airborne battering rams, pricking her bare arms like premonition as she crosses the street, ducks into the half-hanging door of the warehouse with its cracked, buck-tooth facade leering as it swallows her. Inside, she performs the ablutions. Fire, spoon, cotton, lightning licking the wall in stop-motion intervals, illuminating her laddered spine, the clockwork motions, anticipation slightly wobbling the orange-capped syringe in her hands, up until the moment the lightning ceases, a crack of thunder snapping as she plunges down and down. It takes only seconds for the brain to slow the breathing, for the heart to skip a beat, a beat, a beat, for froth to appear at the corner of a slackening lip, for a flame to blow out in the wind. Okay. So after such a heavy poem, I try to read something a little lighter. This is a love poem. Marriage advice. Last night, after a fight with my lover, I sat on my front porch under an umbrella. Vicious thunderstorm pounding down around me, tugging the umbrella slantways and shaking as I smoked my cigarette angrily, watching the park across the street light up with electric daylight. It felt like Mother Nature laughing as the storm grew more furious and insistent, clucking her thunder tongue in a mighty show, sending her rain slivering sideways beneath my umbrella like finger pokes. Girl, you know nothing of storms. Go put your petty squall to bed. Surrendering my anger to the gale, returning inside to lover quiet, stretched out on the bed. I strip off my clothes sodden with her teachings. Lay down, offer my tongued apologies. Lover rubbing raindrops into my skin like holy oils. And outside, the rain slowed and the moon broke through. Okay, so those are all poems from my forthcoming book, The Good Truth, but I don't want to limit my reading tonight to just poems in the book. I wanted to give you a little bit of teasers for what I hope will be my second book forthcoming. So tonight I'm going to read two new pieces. So this is a prose poem, which is a new form for me, and it's called Canary. I was 11 years old the first time my mother took me to see a therapist. We talked and talked, but she heard nothing but my words. Grown now, I yearn for my 11-year-old self, a return to the old ways. A time where she would have been taken to the wise women, the shamans and elders of her native and African ancestors. Shaking their heads and clucking their tongues, they would have sat her down to warm her thick bones by the banked fires, bade her drink the teas that loosen the tongues of all terrorized 11-year-old girls, releasing her voice from the box of its bone cage, her vocals swooping up her throat like a canary fleeing a toxic mine. Oh, how that girl's song would have looped among the rafters, enthralling the shaman women with her tales of truth and sorrow. Oh, how its cloistered wings would have stretched and fluttered as she crooned her lost and lonely chorus. And when that bird trill quieted at last, its windpipe dry and scraped raw, how they would have reached out and cupped it tenderly in their weathered palms, dripped warm salves of nectars and herbs down its aching throat, to place it upon the girl's chest, where she lay already curled among the hunting pups and other children in a great circular pile around the fire. Those wise women would be watching over that sleeping canary girl, nodding to themselves and each other, knowing that tomorrow she would sing again, and the next day, and the day after that, and at each singing her feathered voice growing sweet and strong, they would grin their wide, toothless grins in sly, satisfied delight. All right. I have 2 more poems for you tonight, and then we're going to open it up to a little bit of discussion. I don't hesitate to shy away from the political, and so this is a little taste of a little bit of political side of my poems, inspired by a true story. And it's titled, "To the White Boy Who Asked Me, 'What Are You?' When we were 11 years old. If you tried to look me up in a dictionary, searched every page, scoured old manuscripts, unrolled papyrus back to the age of the disciples and fishes and loaves, crawled through dusty, low-scraping grottos towards the innards of ancient pyramids to scry the hieroglyphics of ages, never would you see my likes. Never find any tongue or translation to describe me, for I am untranslatable. My body, the unutterable truth of the generations of queens turned to slaves, of shamans and seers turned dime store hustlers, yet who in the glimmering nights held one another like diamonds, unwilling to relinquish what they knew was priceless. The language of your ancestors cannot hold my own. Fraught with Freudian slips and poor transcriptions, your limited vowel roundness cannot contain the sing-song lilt, the cheeky click and clack of my greatest grandparents. Yet even among the wilderness of your willful ignorance, some syllables still speak volumes. That low, rolling growl in the back of our throats, which warns you that a caged soul will not remain caged forever. And in the end, the honeyed tang of our unfettered voices pouring across our lips will be sweeter than any vengeance. Okay. So I want to leave you with the title poem to my chapbook, which is called The Good Truth. And it's a more quiet, understated poem that is about basically the theme of my entire chapbook, which is coming to terms with one's own identity and accepting it and finding your place in the universe of things. The Good Truth. It is no accident that when you look back at old photos, the ones you first shunned, thighs too fat, hair too messy, showing your round-eyed daughter what life was like back then, that you see yourself differently. See there how you threw back your head with laughter, mouth sheltered by one slender hand. See how your eyes were full and soft as a mare's. How once you were unseasoned. How easy it is to forget you are her. How easy to forget that it all belongs to you. The laughter, the innocence, the fight, the ache. How it is yours as the moon is the tides, an uncountable distance away, but always there in your hollow, cupped hands. So now I think we're going to have some time for some discussion. I think hopefully now we can invite Chris back on with both of our mics on and have some discussion. we'll see.
Hey, Renee, it looks like Chris might be having some connectivity issues
Okay.
right now.
All right. Well, I'm happy to field. Oh, there she is.
Never mind.
I have no idea what's going on. Slapping me around, and I'm
the
very
world
sorry.
of technical difficulties. So, before we dive into Q&A, I just wanted to have a little bit of discussion back and forth quick about what it's like to be here now. I know you and I met 20 years ago, or was it, wait,
30.
yes, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Oh my God. And we've both been writing our stories since then. So I know that this book is a huge culmination of a lot of work for you. Is there anything you want to share about it, the writing process, or what it means to you to be reaching this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. The two main characters, Chris and Cher, actually came to me 20 years ago in a little writing exercise at a university. And I just remember the professor said, this has to become a book. You can't abandon these characters. You have to turn this into a book. And I was just like, what? You know, I was like, I can't write a book. So yeah, 20 years ago, and my friend said, oh, you could write a book about writing that book. This has been a long process. And finally, you know, I got it in like at the last minute for it to be out by the deadline the publisher had set. And it feels like this huge weight lifted off of me. I feel like it's one of those things that I came here to do something. And this is one of the bigger things that I came here to do. And I have like a lot of peace around it. I'm just like, oh, I did it. So what about you?
Oh, I probably started, I mean, I've been writing poetry since I was 11, and, you know, I was writing poetry when I met you, but I wasn't writing it consistently or seriously. And as things got kind of darker for me in my life over the last 15 years, poetry became something that I felt was going to be out of reach for me forever. And when I entered recovery over 4 years ago, I started going to events like open mics and poetry readings, again, just for my own enjoyment. And I read a poem at one of them, and I got excited about poetry writing again. And it felt like all those old feelings about this is what I'm supposed to do came flooding back. And so I definitely feel like I'm on a journey. I have a new manuscript in the works, and I think I'm starting to feel like that about my second manuscript. Like, this is really the meat and potatoes, like, of what I'm meant to say in the world. So I'm really excited to keep writing and keep publishing. So I'm really grateful for all the support from my current work, because that means I can keep writing. So I'm very excited about this process.
I remember many hot nights in Madison in the summer with no air, and we go up and get a pint of Ben and Jerry's and then listen, you know, I remember listening to your writing in your notebook, and I was always just like, you're the best writer, you're the most amazing writer. So,
thank you.
Both of our writing comes out of a lot of trauma and a lot of struggle, not just in childhood, but, you know, as an adult, all the things that you have to deal with then after you've been through that. So, it's, you know, it has that added levity because of the weight that it comes out of. I think it has that added levity. Yeah. So I'm just so happy for you to be doing this work and to be heard in the world. And I just am one of your very biggest supporters. Maybe I can't say biggest because maybe that would be, I should let Danny and Noelle be that, but I'll be your third biggest.
That means so much to me coming from you. So, because you've always been such a huge encouragement to me. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's any questions, if we want to open it up to questions, but I would certainly be open to answering any if there are some.
Lisa Marie has submitted our first audience question, and she asks, to either or both of you, what advice would you have for a writer looking for one's voice?
Looking for one's voice, the writer's voice?
Yes, a writer looking for their own voice, I'm guessing.
I guess some of my advice would actually be to do a lot of reading. A lot of different kinds of authors, and you'll pull little bits and pieces, or you'll get ideas from things that you see them doing stylistically and with content, which isn't copying them, but you'll pull a little piece here, and it'll lead you down that path where you find yourself. And along with that process, in my experience, is that finding my voice meant I had to find myself. And that's a lot of work. However that works for you, whether, you're Indigenous and a person of color, and you need to find out your cultural identity and embrace that, embody it, or whatever your story is. Those things, for me anyway, have really gone hand in hand. And when I get that centered, it just comes out of you naturally.
Yeah, I definitely would echo that sentiment. I think a huge amount of my coming into my own writing has been personal growth work.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's going to therapy, or whether that's reading, or whether that's taking writing workshops. I agree. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery in so many ways. I've written poems to try and imitate, poems that I like from other people, and not with the intention of publishing those poems, but just with the intention of learning how my voice differs from their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more I explore who I am, the more information I have to write poetry about, because a lot of my poetry is very introspective. It's about identity. And although I do write about the outside world as well, so much of the fodder of my work is just about me thinking about myself, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You're such a wordsmith. You're always that way. Yeah. Carnival Lights started off as an exercise in a classroom, and we were supposed to write, I think, a 7 or 10 page imitation of Cormac McCarthy's All the Pretty Girls. And so it has gone through so many iterations since that time, that I don't think anybody would guess that. That's where that seed started with that. And, you just wind your way through it until you find your voice, and you find what you have to say, and you find the questions you have for the world and for yourself. And, you'll see little bits like, I have a few areas in there where I say, pretty girls, pretty horses. And that's about all that's left of that original seed that started the whole thing. So you never know where it'll go. You never know where it'll take you.
Great question.
All right. Our next question comes from Noelle. Asks, what inspiration have you taken from each other?
I'll answer that one first. Chris has been publishing a lot longer than me. And I think I have always looked to Chris as a leader in finding finding a way to have your own voice, to stay true to your vision for yourself, and find a way to make that voice be heard by other people. Whether that's some of the speaker work that you've done, or from the semi-autobiographical work that you've put out, or now to Carnival Lights, and really like encompassing this huge sort of epic story of intergenerational trauma and beauty. It's really been inspiring to me how you have stayed true to yourself and said, this is what I have to say, and I'm going to find the audience for it. I'm going to find the publishers who will print it. I'm going to find the people who will listen to it. And that's been so helpful for me. It's given me a sense that I can do it too. So I've really, I've said over and over, you're my hero. And it's really just been inspirational.
Well, I just love you, Renee. And that's so sweet of you to say. Thank you so much. I think there's a lot to say about this. And I think that for me, actually, a couple of the things that come to mind in terms of inspiration, and in terms of, I sort of have this a little bit of an awe for you and for your writing, and it's the surprise. It's like, I like to listen to your work like with my eyes closed, because I'm like following you, and then I never know when there's just going to be this little delightful turn that I just could not anticipate in your diction, where you're taking the poem. And I love your poetry so much. I just love it. And that is just one of the things that I love about it, is just this delight of surprise. And gentle. I think you're a very gentle person, and that comes through in your writing. It's powerful. It doesn't shy away from anything, but there's this gentleness and there's this sort of kindness about where you take us that makes then me as a reader trust you as a writer and look forward to where you're going to take us. So I just draw inspiration from that. And I draw inspiration from also you speaking the truth, like reading your stuff and just being like, like kind of what you were saying about me. I feel the same way about you. Like you're also making this path, and you're putting, the truth out there about your life and what you've been through and how you've seen things. And that gives me then courage to push forward in that same way with my writing as well. But, that's just something I just remember when you were 19 when we met. I think I was maybe 20 or something. We were, just beginning to find our way in the world. Yeah. And that was just something I always just appreciate about you so much. You just, you're always very, very kind and gentle despite everything. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Next from Melinda, this one is for Chris. Chris, did you have false starts or incomplete abandoned starts on this book?
False starts?
Yeah, or incomplete abandoned starts, startovers on this book, Carnival Lights.
Well, I would say that it has, I wouldn't necessarily use that as much as I would say that it has gone significant revisions. I mean, significant revisions. Like it's always been kind of the same characters, but I actually, it was 2013, and Renee was talking about some of the political aspects of her writing, and I had done a research project as a graduate student that got me in a lot of trouble with authorities, like a lot of trouble for speaking the truth. And it really traumatized me, and I could not write this book. And I would just sit in front of the book year after year, and nothing would come to me. finally I thought that it was done. This was like, years ago. I thought it was done. I was ready to ship it off to my publisher. And literally, before I'm about to attach it, this whole entire backstory about a character named Leonard poured out of me, the whole thing. In a matter of a few minutes, his entire story just boom, it was downloaded in my head. And I wept for a week. I sobbed for a week. It was so real to me. I couldn't stop crying for an entire week. So it's kind of been like that. There's been some times that it's just been delayed. And then I finally just said, I don't know, this story is its own spirit, its own energy. And I'm here to steward it into the world, and I have to wait for it. That's my experience as a writer. I can't go get it. I have to wait. The story comes to me when it wants to come to me. And then the characters, when I was trying to finish it up here and I was just about overdue, and they get me out of bed at night because I've got more details to add in. And I'm like, oh man, I already said 18 minor details on this. No, you got to get up and put that last minor detail in that. Get up in the middle of the night, go right. So anyway, this is very interesting. Writing is really a lot of fun. Everybody should try it. Everybody should try it.
Agreed.
Wonderful. And this question we have from Daria makes for a wonderful final question, and it is posited to you both. So for Renee, could you tell us about the first poem you ever wrote, and to Chris, likewise for you and your first work of fiction?
Oh, goodness. The first poem I ever wrote was terrible. The first poem I remember writing, that I actually remember finishing and reciting to someone and saying, here's my poem, was a terrible rhyming poem about a fairy who gets lost in a house of mirrors on a carousel. All I remember, I do not have it anymore, and all I remember about it is that it rhymed, and it started with the fairy dances across the something. It was not good. But honestly, the first poem I wrote kind of back to myself after a long time is a poem called Heritage. And it's included in the chapbook. It's actually the very first poem. And I placed it there sort of purposefully because it was that first poem back. And it speaks very strongly to me about me and my identity as mixed race, sort of being multiple races and who that makes me as a person. So I hope you'll all, check it out and read it in the chapbook, but it's out there.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a writer when I was very, very young. And the teachers in elementary school, they would give me a page limit. And they said, you can't write more than a page, because I would just write these stories. And so what I did to, deal with that was I would write, and then the story would go down into the margins and go around the margins in the circle, and then they go over to the page and go around the margins of the circle there. So those were really the first stories that I wrote. I just loved to write. And that got lost from me for a while because of the abuse in my childhood. I couldn't keep writing because I really wouldn't have survived it. I wouldn't have survived looking at myself and the world with that level of intensity. So then I went back to school, and I made my way back into writing. And actually, I think Nichols would really be probably my first story, my first book. Is a book. It's a novel of prose poems. So I'm very excited to read more and hear more of your prose poems, Renee. They're great.
Thank you.
It's a great medium.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sorry, I know I said that was our last question, but there's one from Danny that I had to include, in part because listening to both of your excerpts, the pieces you've read, I think it's a very important question that gets to the heart of a lot of your work. And this question goes, do you ever find it hard to tell your truth, and how do you get beyond that fear?
That's a great question. I can tackle it. Yes. There are certain topics that I am just now starting to write about. And so when I said earlier that my next manuscript, I think, will be more substantial, I think substantial isn't the right word I want to use. The current book is substantial and wonderful, and I'm very, very proud of my work. I think the second manuscript will be diving into topics I was too uncomfortable to touch in the first book. And it's only been through a process of unlayering and peeling off the fear, and finding my voice as a writer and getting more comfortable with the spotlight, so to speak, that I have learned that, like, okay, I can take this baby step and I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And so the more I do that, the more I can do that. That's mm-hmm. pretty much how it goes. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful that I'm given this voice, and I want to use it to the best of my ability to help other people who don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. I hope my work speaks for people who have been through things similar to mine, who haven't been able to take that journey and find their voice. Mm-hmm. So that's really important to me, to keep trying to do that.
Yeah, I would say that really the same thing for me. The times that I have either been unable to write or afraid is when I'm feeling like targeted or attacked and alone. But like Renee said, you draw your courage from the collectivity, right? You draw your courage from that, and you draw your courage knowing that you're not alone. In our ways, I wouldn't be alone spiritually. My ancestors are with me, and in order to move through the fear, that is one thing that I do, is I think that I am doing this work in what we would say a good way, meaning to the best of my ability with a good heart. And what comes out of me, then I trust. Like, I trust that because I believe that that's what needs to be said. So that's how I find my way to move through the things that I find scary or overwhelming.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. That was both wonderful answers and wonderful readings too. Thank you to Renee and Chris both for taking the time out of their evenings to share their work with us. Keep an eye out for any more forthcoming work, which I hear is coming down the pike. On behalf of Room of One's Own Bookstore, thank you to both authors and audience for joining us this evening. And to our audience, I also want to pitch this. If you return to this URL on our Crowdcast page, you will find that there will be a recording of this event that's been preserved there. And please feel free to share it with everybody who you think should have been here and wasn't, or hadn't heard about this and you think they would be a fan. Please share this far and wide. I placed the links to both books once again in the chat bar. So if you haven't purchased your copies yet, please go on. Feel free to do so. It means a lot to see people still showing up in these numbers for virtual events, because we've been doing these for some time now. And I really, really appreciate it. For one last time, thank you both to Renee and Chris. And have a good evening, everybody. Have a safe weekend. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
See you. Have a good night, everybody.